A quick equipment check. We're going to be using graphite. You can get it in different sticks and all sorts of different shapes and sizes. We're used to seeing it in pencil format. I tend to use a lot of woodless pencils, so it's very similar with graphite, and it has just plastic around it to keep your fingers nice and clean. Also, it fits into pencil extenders, so you can use it right the way down to the tip, and it's particularly good for using broadside, so that's where you're holding the pencil and on its side rather than the tip, and using the full width of the graphite. Alternatively, you may want to use jumbo pencils. That can be a good alternative. I'm using a precision eraser. This happens to be the Tombow Mono Zero. Other brands are available. Some kind of electrical eraser is very handy. Other brands are available. Sometimes use putty rubber. That can be incredibly handy. In terms of sharpening, I would go for a good sharpener that keeps your bits, which is very good for sketching out and about. Alternatively, you may want, when you're at home, you may want to use a knife to sharpen your pencils. This happens to be metal, but you can equally use very cheap plastic ones. They work just as well. Some sort of nice soft eraser. I tend to use a blusher brush, very cheap brush, just to kind of brush off little bits of erasers, and some sort of sandpaper to keep your erasers nice and clean. In terms of paper, I tend to use 165 gram smooth paper, but you can use other kind of weight. So I'd go down to maybe 150 in terms of drawing. Going up to 200 is nice quality drawing paper. If you're intending to do painting as well, I'd go for a heavier weight, so up to 300 GSM, that's grams per square meter. In terms of size, I have a variety of different sizes that I work in. I predominantly work in A4, so that's about 21 by 29 point something centimeters, or 8 by 11 inches. There is a huge difference between drawing an eye and an eye of someone specific. So if you're using a photograph or drawing from real life, it's worthwhile knowing what to look for in terms of shape. So first of all, if we think about the upper part of the eyelid, we need to draw some kind of arc. Now, sometimes people have a very shallow arc. Sometimes it goes up much more steeply. There are some people who have a line that goes up as a diagonal and then starts to arc round. There are other people that have it going up as a diagonal, straight across, and then down. Everybody is different. So that's one of the main shapes to look for. The tear duct is a big part of the eye, so it's important to put that shape in. It's not a small shape, it is quite large. It has a function of keeping your eye lubricated so it can move around, and obviously it produces tears if you're upset, but its main job is to keep the eyeball lubricated. So always look at that shape. Everybody's shape is different. Sometimes it tips right down and then comes back up. So you can get all sorts of different shapes at this point as well. The lower part of the eyelid, some people, it drops straight down and then arcs back up, meeting the eyelashes. Think about this kind of shape, this like almond kind of shape. Sometimes it's a little bit further round. That shape is very different for people as well. So you could have people that it comes straight across and then it dips down. You can have people that dips down a lot. You can have all sorts of different shapes to that. Eyelashes are going to go above. So you can start by thickening it up this top line, because everyone has eyelashes that come down. And then at some point they start to appear flicking out. You don't want to have too many. So too many makes it look like a hairy caterpillar, and that is not a good look. Depending on whether you're looking up or down on a subject, you're going to see a certain amount of the skin layer of the eye. So you're going to need to have some sort of line where you can see that skin layer. Everyone is going to be different, so it's worthwhile seeing what you can actually see in either your photo reference or from real life. Then you're going to have some sort of circle. Now, for most people, if they're looking directly at you, you're going to not see the top and the bottom part of that eye. And you need to draw it as best you can as a rounded kind of shape. If you make it wrong, you can just correct it. So if you're pressing lovely and light, so hold your pencil a little bit further down the edge. If you're quite heavy-handed, hold it right the way down so you can really have loose pressure on it. Takes a little bit of practice to draw lightly. Don't bother rubbing anything out. You can just correct your line by putting other lines in. You're going to need to put some kind of circle inside. Now, if someone is in dark light, so that they are indoors or in darkness, then that pupil is going to be massive because they've opened their eye aperture so that they can let as much light in as possible. If, however, they are in sunlight, then obviously the aperture of the the pupil closes, and you're going to get a very small black shape within the eye because that aperture, that hole, has closed down. If someone is looking up, then you're going to be only seeing perhaps that part of the eye. And similarly, if they're looking down, you might only see that part of the eye. So the positioning of the eye varies. It's worthwhile looking at what we call the negative space, so the white of the eye and the shape. So these are not just blank shapes. They can really tell whether you've drawn the eye, the pupil and the iris too big or too small. So this negative space, making sure that that matches your photo reference or person, is really important as well. Next, think about where the eyelid fold comes. So everybody has got some kind of fold above their eye. Sometimes it could be quite high up. It could be in different sections. So put some eyelashes quickly on it. It could be in different sections. You could have a broken lines. You could have lines that sort of overlap. And obviously, as people age, they get more kind of fold lines and so on into their eyelid. So really looking at the angle, the length, the direction, the curve, the shapes that you can see will make your eye look more like the person that you're drawing, a specific eye rather than a genetic general kind of eye. We're now going to go into drawing an eye. I'll take you through it step by step, so I hope you join me in just sketching an eye. It's quite a quick sketch. I'm working on A4 paper, so that's about 21 by 29 centimetres or 8 by 11 inches, but you can draw yours whatever size you like. In terms of starting, think about what it is we're drawing. We're just going to draw the eye. We're not going to worry about anything else apart from this. So we don't need to put everything else in. So just think about the size that you want to draw it. There's nothing wrong with drawing a tiny little one. If you want to take up a whole, this is an A4 size piece of paper. So if you want to turn it landscape and draw a massive eye, then you absolutely can. I'm going to just draw relatively small-ish. I mean, quite a big eye for as eyes go. Everybody's eye shape is really different. Okay, so when we're drawing people, we need to look at how much it rises. So if we think of it from where it rises and falls, so some people it's got a very shallow lift, some people it's a really big lift to it. Everybody's going to look different. We all look different to each other. That's the wonderful thing about humanity. I'm going to be drawing, hard to estimate, but it's kind of like towards the sort of 2 o'clock, I guess. And then it arcs round towards the 3 o'clock as it goes to the apex. And then it starts to come back down 3:30, maybe coming towards 4 o'clock, but more like sort of 3:30, I guess. Okay, and we're looking at the distance between where it starts to rise and it comes down and falls. So how wide this bit is by comparison to how high. If it helps you to put a vertical line going all the way across, sorry, a horizontal line going all the way across and a vertical line going all the way across, then you can do. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that may help you see that the tear duct, for example, so this is the tear duct down here that lubricates your eye and obviously creates tears if you're crying, it goes below that line. So you've got that very important dip shape. It comes up slightly before it then starts to fall back down towards, say, 3:30, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then arcing round. And then because these are the eyelashes that are coming round, we want this line to join back up. And we've got the edge of the eye. So from about halfway here, we can start to see there's a skin. We've got the top bit of where the skin meets the eye, and then we've got the face. We've got, if you think this is the eyeball, this is the bit of skin that joins it, and then we've got the face bit of skin that comes down. We want to really put in those different surfaces because that's part of the essential structure that we can see in the eye. It's all about observations. Learning to draw is all about recording what you see and the observation. So we've got a thick bit of eyelash where it's very dark coming over. So I'm just going to draw that additional line, and then I'm just going to indicate them in with the HB pencil before putting them in with the 8B. So eyelashes taper off, so you want to press your pencil to the paper and then lift. So as you lift, you're going to get a pointed edge. If I stop, I'm going to get a flat edge, a rounded edge, and that's not going to look very much like eyelashes. So we want to lift as we flick off the paper. So we've got the odd one that flicks out. Do not do too many. I always refer to it as having caterpillars, and we do not have caterpillars in our eyes. So just the odd flick mark going beyond that black. And then to save time, I'm going to come in with my 8B, block in that eyelash shape. And then just go over some of these flick marks. And then it's hard to see, but there are eyelashes that are flicking down over this dark edge. You don't want to go mad and have too many, but you do need to get enough in. Okay, so let's put the iris in. So whatever the colour people's eyes, we've got a circle, and that technically goes behind the eye. So we're going to put in the pupil, so that's the dark black part of the eye, and we're looking for the distance between the edge and the pupil, so that needs to be all the way around. It kind of merges into the darkness at the top here. And then we've got a window reflected. So we've got 3 curved, what would be rectangle lines, but they are obviously curved. The eyeball is rounded, so it's distorting that window in it. A little bit of light reflection here. We've got the pinky kind of bit of the eye that comes around here. So we're looking at this white section. So there's one way that you can check the size and shapes that you're drawing is looking at this as a negative space. What kind of shapes? So I know that I need to bring my eye down a little bit and rounder, because this white shape is narrower at the bottom. So I can extend that circle out and round to make it more similar. So we've got the fold of the eye. So this is where your eyelid is creased back up, or her eyelid is creased back up. We've got an extra little line that comes in, and then we want to go over, and we can also look at the distance between the fold line and the eyelashes to just check that we're going in the right direction. So coming around to 3 o'clock, down 3:30, so 20 past 3, 3:30, to just beyond where this comes up, and then we've got it coming down at a more of an angle, more of a sort of 3:30, 4 o'clock kind of angle. So let's put in our tear duct shape. So we've got a little kind of lump in here, another little lump and section here. You can use the pencil to create a little bit of tone, so we can press darker where it's slightly darker and then lighten it up. We can darken it as it goes into the eye section. And then I'm going to just use the broad side of the pencil to start filling in the iris shape. So this is a muscle. It opens and closes the black pupil, which is a hole that lets the light through the eyeball into the retina at the back. Understanding how the eye works really helps you start to think about the shapes that you're drawing and why you're doing it the way that you're doing it. So I'm jaggeding in, not sure that that's a word, but I'm working in a jagged motion, that tone. So just using the HB pencil to start off with. I know there's lots of artists that love to jump straight into the darker 2, 4, 6Bs and work in that. I tend to prefer to block it in with a lighter pencil and then come back in with a darker pencil. We're all different. If you decide that you prefer going darker, quicker, do it. It's your work. It's really important to find styles and ways of working that really suit you and your preferred way of working. Like, I know a lot of artists that love blending with a stump and so on, and I tend to not do that very often because I prefer the control that you get from just working with the graphite. We're all very different. Some people love charcoal and pastels. I tend to not use them so often. Again, I like the control that you get from direct application. But you do get very interesting effects working in different ways, and that's why it's really great to try them. Even if you don't particularly like working maybe in that style, it informs your practice. I'm always very conscious of the fact that we are all very different to each other, and there's not one way of doing it, there's many, and they create slightly different effects, and that's absolutely fine. So I'm just starting to block in the white of the eyes. Whites of eyes are never white. They are various shades of bluey grey, and because it's a ball rather than a flat surface, the tone varies. So we need to really show that it starts to get a little bit darker in different places. So that's much more noticeable on the left hand side of the eye as it goes towards the nose and shadows. Her face is being lit. It's lighter, like you can see it directly on the nose. The light is coming from the right hand side of her face. So this part of her eye is going to be darker than the other side of her eye, just because it's in shadow. The light has come from the other side. Just tidying up that edge of her eye. Okay, and then we're going to start to put in the tone of the surrounding surface. So I'm using the broad side of the pencil. I'm working following that arc. So I do quite a lot of contour shading. There's different ways of applying pencil marks in different directions to create a wide variety of textures and effects. I do tend to, when I'm doing faces, to do quite a bit of contour shading. So that is following the shape and using the directional lines and directional strokes to create the face shape So you can see I'm going down and around at the bottom, and I'm up and over at the top, again using that broad side of the pencil. I will come round with a darker pencil just to emphasize the depth of tone. And say there can be quicker ways of doing it where you go straight into using a 4B or a 8B or whatever it is that you want to use, and that's absolutely fine. I just prefer to build it up a little bit gently. So this is the pinky kind of bit of the eye, which is much darker. It does have the reflective little highlights in there. See, the eye is moist so that it can rotate and look around. So you need to leave those areas. If it gets a little bit dark, you can always use the Mono-Zero or the electric razor to just pull out some of those sections. There's nothing wrong with using the eraser. It's a drawing tool. So this little corner is the sort of drier side of the eye. And the pinky bit has got I'm going to come back in with a darker pencil, I think, in a bit. So this is quite light. And if you're not sure in terms of tonal ranges, then you can turn this picture into a black and white image, and that can sometimes help. But what we're really looking for is if you squint your eyes, the highlights were in the tear ducts and the reflection in her eye are going to be the brightest bits of the eye. This would be, with the white bit of her eye, is actually much duller. And then by contrast, we're looking to see how light or dark this. So this is almost the same kind of a tone as the white of her eye. In fact, this bit here, which is where it's picking up the highlight, is probably slightly lighter. So this bit of her face is a similar tone to this bit. So it's still got a light tone to it. It's not white. We don't want to leave it white. We need to have that contrasting kind of effect. And then this part of the eye where it folds in is dark, so I can go along that line to start darkening that down. And then as it comes over, this is more in shadow. It's a darker skin tone than, so this is lighter and this is darker. So we want to have that contrasting effect. I'm just going to build up the eye skin. So broad strokes, just gently plotting in. Hadn't thought about going quite so high, but might as well. All right, so I'm gonna come in underneath the eye, start adding in a little bit of tone. So this bit is a little bit darker here than it is here. And then this fold in the skin as it goes into the crease is darker. And then the whole of this is getting a little bit darker as it comes over, so I can go over that and emphasize it. And I can use the HB pencil. Well, you can use any pencil, but because I'm using the HB, I'm saying HB, almost as a blending tool. So I don't have to blend it with a stump to make it nice and smooth. I'm kind of just letting the graphite do the work. And this tends to be the way that I like to work. I prefer, so I've done one using the blending stuff, and you get a lovely soft approach. And I did this very quickly, and I didn't bother carrying on and adding loads of detail. So you get a certain kind of effect with using the stump to blend it in. Sorry, going the wrong way. And this obviously creates a different type of texture to it. So you've got the mottledness of the paper coming through. And obviously, depending on the make of your paper and the type of paper, you're going to get different effects. Different paper textures are going to create a different type of an effect. So this is just some quick, pretty cheap drawing paper. So it's nice and it's relatively smooth. So it's nice to draw on. So it's not expensive drawing paper that I'm using. I'm just using some pretty cheap kind of drawing paper. Quite like using smooth paper to do sketching and drawing on. Just because the more texture you've got, the more sort of dappledness you get through the image. And so your choice of paper can have quite a big effect. So just going to add the tone and start putting the side of the nose. Okay, so this is, I don't want to add too much because I'm really just interested in drawing an eye. And I don't tend to put eyelashes so much on the bottom just because it can look a little bit fake. But because this is such a large drawing, if you want to add the odd eyelash, again, we don't want to look like hairy caterpillars. Not too much. Just the odd one or two. Again, you can carry on building up detail and information as much as you like. It's a sketch, so you can be really quick or as slow as you like. So I'm just going to come in with an 8B, start putting in that crease. Running along here. And then use the pencil to run along that line, softening the transition. So where you want a rounded surface, you really do need to have a soft transition from tone. so that you're showing that that surface continues around, and then that needs to start to fade out a little bit. I've made it a little bit too blocky. I'm just going to soften that. So just use an ordinary rubber just to soften that transition. Okay, so then she's got a little crease to her eye coming in here, and another one that runs into that shadow here. And obviously the older you get, the more these crease lines really start to show up. If you wanted to build up the kind of the folds in the skin and so on, you can start to use the tip to do that. I'm going to come back in around the edges. If you're someone that worries about smudging, I haven't got a bit of paper, smudging, then you can put a little piece of paper underneath, or a bit of kitchen roll or something underneath your hand, just that you don't smudge the pencil mark as you work. Something I tend to, I do quite a lot of colour pencil work, which is very realistic, so it takes a long time. And so having a bit of paper really helps to be able to put underneath your hand so you don't smudge things. So I'm just darkening down that tone, and I haven't made everything dark in there. I want it to have a little bit of light. So although it is very dark in the image, sometimes you can get a total reflection of what's going on in an eye. This one is got a little bit of reflection, and then we've got the eyelashes are being reflected. So we've got this window reflection in the eye, but we've got little flicks of eyelashes being reflected in the eye, and you can see them right into the whites of the eye. So I've probably made that a little bit dark, but and they kind of go in this direction. Just darken where the tear duct is, build up with that depth of tone. Because what can make a drawing look better is really having that lovely contrast from light to dark. If it's all your tones are too similar, it kind of really loses that 3D kind of shaping. So obviously I can build that up more. I can come in with a eraser. So if you've made it too light or too dark, you can come in with an eraser and just pick out little bits and highlights and things like that, but you don't need to. It's not compulsory. So this is the same eye as this one. So it's another quick sketch. So this is using a blending kind of technique to it. And again, you can add more information. And then this is without. So this is just using pure graphite. As I said, this tends to be my preferred way of kind of working. There's no right or wrong. There's just a different way to do things. So I hope you enjoy doing that. And let me see your work. It'd be lovely to see it. Take care. Bye.